Welcome back to my channel, guys. This is your boy Ali. Hope everybody's doing good. It's been about a month. I haven't made a video because I've been super busy with work, and of course that's priority. This is just my side fun that I do and try to help people out, answer some questions, etc. So my most recent video was about a life of a NOC engineer, and I got a lot of feedback and comments and stuff. People asking me, how should they approach or prepare for an interview? And so I did some homework and just gathered all my experience that I had with the interviews that I did for the NOC engineering positions, and back in my old days, this was about like 10 years back. So I just wanted to help you guys out. Maybe somebody who's trying to go for an interview, and maybe this could help them out. So when you go in for these NOC interviews, now NOC stands for Network Operations Center, and this is where you work and pretty much monitor and troubleshoot all the network for the company or globally, etc. Depends who you work for. The scope is different for each. But these questions that I'm about to address are going to apply to level 1, level 2, level 3, and even higher than that. So, if you are going for an interview, I think this would be a really, really good guide. And I think if you just hit this video and go for your interview, I think you'll probably do really well enough to get a job. And that's my 2 cents about that. Now, when you do go for an interview, make sure you do prepare a little bit. Obviously, preparing as in be confident, and stuff like that. The basic stuff that they ask you, about your career and your work experience and why do you want to work for the company and stuff like that. But make sure you do understand how to troubleshoot things, because when you work in a NOC, I think the number one thing that they're really trying to find out is that if you have the troubleshooting mindset, because they could hire any straight out of school person with no experience and just train them how to disable alarms or check alarms and stuff like that. But what the NOC engineers really get paid for is how they troubleshoot, right? So let's say if a gateway or a site does go down, how do you proceed, right? What's your step 1? What's your step 2? They want to know what's your thinking process behind troubleshooting. Now, in my case, I would always try to replicate the problem in like a sandbox environment. So if I could replicate it, most likely I could, keep working on it, and I'll find a resolution. But a lot of times, problems are intermittent or sporadic, so it's really, really hard to catch them. So then you have to run packet captures on gateways and stuff. But that's besides the topic. But I think the main thing they want to really know is that your level of understanding of how you're going to proceed with troubleshooting. Because in my experience, when I was working in the NOC, a client would call and be like, hey, our network just went down, and we're their managed services provider. So I'm in the NOC, and I would get an email or something, or maybe, and then I would call the client up, or they would call me and be like, hey, can you just help us out, this and that. So now these people who are calling you are senior management or middle management people, and they're really responsible for bringing that network up in the shortest amount of time. So what you have to do is pretty much jump on the call with them, do a web conference. So what I would do is send them a WebEx, Cisco WebEx, or you could do Zoom or whatever else, screen share. So they would join the call, and then it would be me, maybe a couple other people on their team that are responsible for different stuff. Sometimes I don't have access, so they have, they give me access to log in and troubleshoot and stuff. So now this could be very, very nerve-wracking, because it's a down situation and the client could be losing a lot of money, and you just have to kind of be at your A game and be very comfortable, and you have to be able to think under pressure and to be able to resolve the problem and bring their network back up. And I've done this for so many years that I feel like I've built that thick skin where I'm comfortably able to do that if I had to back when I was working in a NOC. So yeah, I mean, I just wanted to share my experience with you guys. So before we waste time, let's jump right into it. Now, of course, the first thing I recommend you have, down packed is the 7 layers of the OSI model. Now, what are the 7 layers? Of course, I mean, if you are applying for a NOC engineer level position, then you should know this without a doubt. And I'll go through them right now. So level 1 is physical, then you got the data link, and then you got the layer 3 is network, and then you got the transport, and then session, presentation, and application. Now, most of your network stuff is on layer 3, and if you're doing a lot of mostly switching and network stuff, it's mostly on the data link or the network level, which is layer 2 and 3. And sometimes it's rarely ever where you might have to send the client into their data center to make sure the cables are okay, but that's like super rare. So layer 2, layer 3, you're pretty much logging to these gateways and running packet analysis and traces and everything, collecting logs and checking them and making sure the TCP and UDP messages are sending what they're supposed to server, client, and how the setup is according to the current infrastructure. Now, this is just basic, but like if you work on databases and stuff, they communicate on different levels, and depending on what the problem is, you have to know where to start the troubleshooting. So a lot of times, if you don't know where to start, you end up capturing wrong logs, and then you're like sitting through those logs, you're not going to find anything because obviously you didn't even capture the right ones. And a lot of times these servers are not constantly logging, so you have to make sure they're set to detail level of logging. Otherwise you're again not going to see anything, because if you keep running detailed logs over and over all throughout the day and for forever, you're obviously going to bog down the servers and you're going to bring everything down. So you just have to make sure that you know what you're doing. Just make sure you are collecting the right ones, because obviously that's the key. Because once you collect the right traces, it takes hours to be able to determine if the problem's there. Now, a lot of times you might have to collect traces from like 5 different places, depends on where the packet ended up or where the packet dropped or whatever the case is, right? So but the basics is that you have to be able to collect the right traces. But yeah, know your OSI model. I mean, 7 layers there without a doubt are gonna drill you down on that. And of course, network is all your protocols on the network level, which is IP, ICMP, IPsec, IGMP, and packets, how the packets work. Data link, which is your switching, how the Ethernet, PPP switch. So of course, they're gonna ask you, can you tell me about yourself? So here you want to talk about your strong points. Obviously, you want to tell them a little bit about yourself. You want to tell them your work experience that's related to the job you're applying for. You don't want to go rambling about stuff that's unrelated or things you have done that doesn't relate to this job, because that'll just simply disqualify you. So you have to make sure when they ask you that question, tell me about yourself, you have to relate it to the current position that you're applying for. So of course you got to know what a ping is, right? And why the ping command is used to check connectivity between a client and a server, and stuff like that. So definitely that's going to be one of the questions. So what is TCP IP? What is UDP? What is TCP? What is the difference between them? And they might ask you, hey, which protocol is used if you're running packet analysis between these 2 servers, and what kind of messaging protocol are they using. So they might just ask you in that sense as well. And then being a team player is a huge part of working in a NOC, because a lot of times you may run into, depending on your company, a lot of junior level engineers are gonna come up to you at random times when you're busy, and they're gonna need guidance, and you have to help them out. You have to actually walk over to their desk and kind of sit down with them and help them out. So that's going to be a lot of mentorship you're going to have to do if you're on the escalation level. But if you're on level 2 and you do need help, you could go up to the seniors and go to the level 3 guys, and they'll definitely help you out, right? So there's a lot of collaboration and going back and forth, and a lot of teamwork that you have to be a part of, because not everybody knows everything, but I'm sure somebody else does that sits next to you or something. So constantly, you have to also show in the interview that you're a team player. So they might ask you questions about what is a proxy and what's the function of a proxy and why is a proxy used in certain network environments and stuff like that. So make sure you know what that is. And they might throw like a case scenario where, let's say, a host computer cannot be reached over a local network using a host name, but can be reached using an IP. What do you think is a problem? Now, in that case, it's a very basic level of question. You have to know the answer for that. It's normally something wrong with the DNS, right? So you have to go check your CNAMEs or the AAA records and stuff like that. They might ask you, what is layer 3? What is layer 2? What does a network switch do? What's the function of a network switch? And they might ask you basic level stuff. They might not, like, if you're depending on the level you're interviewing for, like level 3, when I was applying for, they would straight up ask you, hey, what command do you run if you want to debug this on the gateway? And so you have to know the commands. But if you're going for level 2, then I think they might just ask you, or level 1, that what is a network switch and stuff like that. So make sure you know what that is. And so how would you find uptime on a Cisco router? Now, that's one of the very basic thing. You could just run a show command, and it'll tell you, like, if you do show version, or there's a few other commands you could run once you're logged into via telnet or SSH into the router. The version, once you check that, it'll tell you the version, but it'll also tell you what's the uptime. Uptime is pretty much how long the router's been up. And how many hours and minutes and stuff. So that's a very basic question, but they may ask you that, so know that. Now, they may ask you, okay, if you run into a problem where you cannot resolve a problem, what would you do? So then, of course, you would try to get help from your peer, or then you would escalate the problem. And of course, they may ask you, what is a 3-way handshake? So the client sends a synchronized request, and then the server responds with a synchronized request and acknowledgement, and then the client responds with the acknowledgement. So it's SYN-ACK, and then ACK. So that's how that works. So, know that. They might ask you, what is trunking? Now, there's all kinds of trunking, right? All kinds of circuits, trunks. So you have to know what is trunking and what's the purpose for trunking and stuff like that. Now, have you ever found yourself in a situation that required a decision in which risk for failure was very high? Now, what they're trying to really understand here is that, how would you go about troubleshooting this, and how would you go about, gathering information about this? And they want to know, how would you logically, or what's your thought process you would get into before you go ahead and start troubleshooting this type of thing. So now what you want to do is think out loud, because they want to see how you're thinking, what's your thought process. So whatever you're going to do, just be like, hey, so first, if you need a notepad or a pen, you could tell them, and they would appreciate that, because they know that you're really trying to answer the question in the best way possible. So, of course, if you have to take notes down to understand the questions and give them a proper answer, you're more than welcome to do that. That's welcomed into job interviews. Now, they might ask you, how would you test delay and route of packets between two connections? Trace route is one of the commands that you would constantly use, and you're pretty much using that. You probably use that on CMD in Windows. Is similar command tracer T, but you could you could use traceroute on the Cisco CLI as well to test connectivity between two endpoints. So, and how the packets route back and forth, and you could test delays and stuff. So know that that's pretty basic too. Now, how would you identify which PC and what port it's using on the network? Okay, that's a good question. So they might ask you, hey, how do you figure out what port that PC or that workstation is on? So you could look that up simply by using ARP, which is Address Resolution Protocol, and you could log into the switch and pretty much get the MAC address table from the switch. So there's a couple of ways to do that, but that might be a part of the question that they may ask as well. Now, of course, they're going to ask you, now these are the technical questions that I just went over, but they're going to ask you some behavioral questions, and they might ask you, why should we hire you, and stuff like that. Now, when they ask you that, make sure you show them enthusiasm, and you make sure you show them willing to learn. And if you don't know something, tell them that you're a fast learner, and if you are, don't lie to them. Just be super honest, because the thing is, like, if you do end up getting the job, maybe you won't like it, or maybe something bad will happen at that job if you're trying to bluff it through the interview. So make sure all these questions that I'm telling you, I'm just not telling you so you could go ahead and try to beat around the bush and get through the interview, but actually go and study these things, right? Because that might be part of what you really need to do day to day in your production level network. So but yeah, I mean, why should we hire you? That's a great question. So make sure you have a really outstanding answer for that. But yeah, I mean, so these are pretty much just some basic questions that I came up with that were asked in my days. Now it's been about 10 years, so these are still relevant, because people who are trying to get into the network field, or like myself, I started in the NOC on level 2 and then worked my way up. So now I'm completely different. I'm doing a lot of like pre-sale stuff and design and solution architecture and everything, but that took a lot of years to be able to understand the back end of things. So either way, guys, if you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button. If this video was any help to you, let me know in comments. And if you have any questions, do drop in the comments. I normally answer like all the comments. Hit the bell icon, subscribe to my channel, tell your friends about it, and I will see you guys in a bit.